Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the walk. Today is Tuesday, December 17th, and we saw yesterday that God is ready to come against Tyre, that there's this prophecy against Tyre. Tyre was a mighty, mighty city, and all these nations were going to be rising up against Tyre. We saw that it did, in fact, happen. That brings us to Ezekiel 26, verse 3, and it says, "Therefore, thus says the Lord God, behold, I am against you, O Tyre, and will bring up many nations against you, as the sea brings up its waves." Okay, why is it talking about the sea and waves? Because Tyre was a city that was on the Mediterranean coast, as well as this island. And one of its strengths was that it had access to such an abundance of fresh water. So it made it very difficult for Nebuchadnezzar to take Tyre down when he did. Verse 4, "They shall destroy the walls of Tyre and break down her towers, and I will scrape her soil from her and make her a bare rock." So basically what God is saying is, I am going to strip away all of that strength. So look at this. Walls are strong. Towers are strong. Scraping the soil and making it a bare rock. If the soil becomes rocky, it's no longer able to produce food. So it's tearing down the strength of Tyre. Verse 5, "She shall be in the midst of the sea, a place for the spreading of nets. For I have spoken, declares the Lord, and she shall become the plunder for the nations, and her daughters on the mainland shall be killed by the sword. Then they will know that I am the Lord." So what this is talking about is when the people of Tyre that were on the mainland at the edge of the Mediterranean, many of them escaped to this island that was also a part of Tyre that was out in the Mediterranean Sea. And Tyre ended up being plundered. Many of the people ended up being killed. Verse 7, "For thus says the Lord God, behold, I will bring against Tyre from the north Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, king of kings, with horses, chariots, and with horsemen, and a host of many soldiers." Now, one of the things that really jumped out at me on this lesson was the King of Kings. That did not sit well with me. I was like, I'm going to have to really research that and figure out what that means. But before we get to that, there was some very interesting notes about Nebuchadnezzar in the Cultural Study Bible. And it said that his correct Hebrew name was Nebuchadrezzar, reflecting the Akkadian name of Nebuchadrezzar, the god Nabu, who protected his eldest son. Spelling his name Nebuchadnezzar is a disobliging pun on the name of this king who destroyed Jerusalem. This spelling with a nun instead of a resh presupposes Akkadian Nebuchadnezzar, and that meant protect the mule. The mule, being a hybrid animal, is incapable of producing offspring. This scrollless etymology, therefore, expresses the opposite of what was intended of the original meaning of the names. Moreover, the absence of a descendant was a notorious curse in Assyrian treaties and ancient Near Eastern curse formulas. In Ezekiel, however, the Babylonians in general are portrayed in a positive light, for they are in the service of the Lord's plan to punish Judah and other nations. Okay, so let's break this down. What on earth is this saying? Well, there was this other spelling, and the other spelling meant a few things. It meant protect the eldest son or the heir, but it also meant protect the mule. And it was kind of a contradiction because the mule was a hybrid animal that could not have children. So they changed this name and they pulled out that Hebrew letter for the R and made it Nebuchadnezzar. That's important to keep in mind because now we're going to talk about the King of Kings. In Cultural Study Bible, that was a title that was often applied to Assyrian kings. The Babylonians must have copied that practice from their Assyrian predecessors, just as the Persians did some time later. So the Babylonians refer to Nebuchadnezzar as the King of Kings just to talk about his might and his majesties. It doesn't mean that he's become God. It's just a term, it's a phrase that they threw on this person to make him sound more important, basically. Verse 8 and 9. He will kill with the sword your daughters on the mainland. He will set up a siege wall against you and throw up a mound against you and raise a roof of shields against you. He will direct the shock of his battering rams against your walls, and with his axes he will break down your towers. So in the Cultural Study Bible, it says the description of the stages of the siege is the most detailed one in the Bible and is based on the repeated experience of victims of Assyria and Babylonian attacks. So what's involved in this siege? The daughters are getting killed on the mainland. They're setting up a siege wall. They're throwing up a mound against you. They're raising a roof of shields against you. He's directing the shock of the battering rams against your walls. And with his axes, he will break down your towers. That's the number 6. That's the number for man. So we've got to keep in mind that these Babylonians are on God's plan, whether they're choosing to be or not. God is using them in this prophecy against Tyre. Have a wonderful day. God bless, and keep walking the walk.